Okay, let's jump right in. Today we're unpacking an explainer that decodes the chaotic and honestly incredibly emotionally charged raw transcripts from a massive mourning event over in Tehran. When thousands of people gather for a state funeral, specifically the funeral of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the sheer wall of sound can just feel like, well, noise to the outside world. But if we peel that back and look at the raw audio and transcripts from the ground, it's like a giant puzzle revealing the actual mindset of the crowd. We are sticking strictly to the source transcripts today, essentially separating the highly produced state messaging from the authentic and sometimes totally conflicting feelings of the real people standing right there in the crowd. To really get a grip on this on-the-ground reality, we've broken this down into 5 key themes. We'll look at the atmosphere of grief, the intense calls for vengeance, a surprising pragmatic voice, the pledges of allegiance, and finally, a unified message of defiance. Starting off with Part 1, the atmosphere of grief, and understanding both the religious and personal loss. We really need to start by looking at just how profound the sense of personal and religious loss actually was for the attendees captured in the transcript. It's absolutely crucial to notice the intensely personal, almost familial connection the mourners feel here. In the transcript, there's this one specific attendee who says, "When my father died, I didn't cry this much compared to when His Excellency the Aga was martyred." Think about that for a second. This isn't just your standard run-of-the-mill political support, right? It's a profound emotional attachment. For a lot of the people in this crowd, they aren't just processing the death of a head of state. They're mourning the loss of a foundational patriarch. And almost instantly, this grief gets elevated from something personal to something entirely sacred. You hear the crowd's fervent chants constantly invoking these massively powerful religious symbols. In the raw audio, there are just continuous cries for Imam Hussein and references to the Zulfiqar, which is the legendary sword of Ali. So by weaving these foundational Shia Islamic figures into their mourning, they're actively framing their modern political grief and everyday struggles right within an ancient, righteous religious tradition. They're not just mourning a guy. They are participating in a continuous, sacred history of martyrdom and resilience. It's not just sadness. To them, it's a historical battle playing out in real time. Moving on to Part 2, calls for vengeance and the geopolitical anger of the crowd. Here's where we see exactly how that deep religious grief flips and translates outward into this completely unified geopolitical anger. The transcript takes a very sharp turn from sorrow straight into direct hostility. The raw audio picks up these incredibly clear, coordinated chants where the mourners are crying out, "Curse of Allah upon Israel." It's a stark reminder of who the state considers its ideological enemies. And in the middle of a mourning rally, a chant like this acts as a magnet. It instantly unifies the crowd. The sorrow is basically channeled, giving thousands of people a specific target for all that immense emotional energy. It lays bare exactly who the crowd, and really the state's ideology, blames for their broader geopolitical struggles. So the really interesting part is how this enmity is actually justified by the people there. One voice in the crowd sums it up perfectly. They say, "According to our leader, we have a blood feud with America. Our relationship with America will never be good." This attendee explicitly views this lasting animosity not as some temporary, geopolitical disagreement, but as a direct, unchangeable inheritance from their late leader's doctrine. They literally call it a blood feud, a deeply ingrained generational conflict that they are fully committing to carry forward. Now, looking at these massive crowds all chanting in unison, it is so easy to assume they're just a complete monolith of opinion, right? I mean, you see this endless sea of black clothing, you hear this synchronized shouting, and you naturally think everyone is on the exact same page. But, well, actually, our analysis of the raw, unedited transcript reveals a surprisingly different, highly nuanced perspective tucked right in the middle of that very crowd. Which brings us to Part 3, a pragmatic voice, exploring dissent and fear in the crowd. Let's look at this absolutely fascinating, totally contradictory moment of stark pragmatism from just one individual attendee. This moment brilliantly illustrates the real tension on the ground. On one hand, you have the mandated, loud ideological defiance we just talked about, the whole "our relationship with America will never be good" chant. But then, listen to what else is captured. Look, let me say something. America is a superpower. If we don't give them something, they will blow our officials into the air. We shouldn't just think about ourselves, we need to think a little about our officials. Wow, that completely juxtaposes the fierce, unyielding state ideology right up against a very real, very pragmatic fear of a global superpower's actual military capabilities. It just proves that even inside the most fervent, highly charged ideological rallies, basic human fear, self-preservation, and plain old geopolitical realism are still very much alive among the everyday people. Okay, let's look at part 4, Pledges of Allegiance and the Political Resolution. As this massive rally hits its absolute climax, the focus actively pivots away from mourning the deceased and moves directly towards cementing the authority of the new leadership. So order is ultimately restored from the podium. The main speaker steps up, takes definitive control, and officially rallies this huge crowd to pledge their loyalty to the new leader. He explicitly names Hazrat Ayatollah Haj Syed Mujtaba Husseini Khamenei. And honestly, this is the ultimate political purpose of a state funeral of this magnitude. It acts as this massive public bridge, taking all that immense emotional weight and loyalty from the previous leader and transferring it squarely onto the shoulders of the successor. Now, to ensure total compliance, the speaker gives these highly specific instructions on exactly how to visually demonstrate this allegiance. He shouts out to the crowd to raise the Iranian flag. Then he commands those holding the red flags of vengeance to raise those up too. But the really telling part is his final instruction. He tells anyone with empty hands to raise them up high as well. He is making absolutely sure that every single person in that crowd, regardless of what they brought with them, is physically participating in this pledge. It is a highly calculated move to visually demonstrate absolute, unbroken unity, both for the cameras and, for the state's own internal validation. Finally, part 5, a message of defiance, addressing the enemies of the state. Once that pledge of allegiance is totally locked in, the rally turns its attention back outward, issuing a very direct warning to anyone it perceives as an existential threat. The official speaker really attempts to project an image of absolute, unshakable resilience here. He boldly addresses what he calls the blind enemies of the Islamic Republic, explicitly stating, "Listen carefully, 4 months ago, you resolved with all your might to topple the Islamic Republic and divide Iran." But then he counters that by declaring that today, the nation is firmer and more steadfast than it was 4 months ago. By pointing to a specific, alleged attempt to collapse the state, he's actively weaving this narrative of survival and unbreakable strength. He's basically leveraging this massive crowd as visual, undeniable proof that the state simply cannot be overthrown. And we leave you with the crowd just roaring back, Labaik Ya Khamenei, which means we are at your service, right? Followed by the chant, "This army has come for the love of the leader." So we've broken down the deep religious grief, the coordinated geopolitical anger, that completely surprising pragmatic dissent hidden right in the crowd, and the meticulous staging of political allegiance. Knowing what you know now about the highly nuanced, sometimes conflicting sentiments swirling within that massive group of people, what does this complex, unified display of defiance truly signal for the stability and the future of the region? Think about that for a bit. Thanks so much for exploring this explainer with us today.